And all right, sit down, okay? Stop all this friendship stuff. All right. So I'm going to read the whole psalm to you. It's 24 verses. I just realized as I was sitting in the back that this is actually my favorite psalm. You would think I would have saved that for last. But now don't be surprised if I say that about another psalm that comes up, all right? But no, this really is one of those cornerstones in my life. You know, I had a teenager text me from Pennsylvania, this is my life verse, what's yours? So I had to send about 17 verses, For this part of my life, it was this, and for that part of my life, it was the other. But how fun to have a life verse. If you don't have one, read the Bible and find one, okay? What happens is God reaches out from the Bible, and that grabs a hold of you in a way that you are never really ever freed from that passage. It just becomes part of you. So, Psalm 139. O Lord, you have searched me, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and have laid your hand upon me. And such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light will become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. You created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, and I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body, and all the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. I'm going to move on. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. And see if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Isn't that amazing stuff? Really, really is. One of the key thoughts of the Bible is the idea that we can know God. If you do your homework and a little bit of research, you realize that, most people are trying to find God and they're working hard to do it, when actually the weird thing about Christianity is it's about God who came looking for us. Of course, when I say you can know God, you have to realize He's infinite, we're finite, so we can never really comprehend all of who God is. Once there was a Bible student who went to the great preacher Spurgeon, and he was all upset because he couldn't understand a Bible verse. And the great preacher said, son, give the Lord credit for knowing things you don't understand. Sometimes He's just beyond our reach, and that's okay. It says in Isaiah 55, my thoughts are not your thoughts. My ways are not your ways. But He has given us His word. And friends, hear me, He's given us the Bible with the sole intention that you and I could know Him, that you and I could have a close friendship with Him. Again, in the garden, it says that He came looking for Adam and Eve. It was His idea. In Jeremiah 9, let not the wise man boast in his riches or of his wisdom or of his might, but let anybody who's going to boast that they understand and know me. Once again, you can know God. One more time, Jesus, He confirms this truth in John 17. This is eternal life, that you may know the one true God and Jesus Christ whom you have sent. Okay? Now here's the problem. We can know a lot about God without getting to know Him. You know, you might know a lot about your favorite actress or sports figure, you know, their stats, you know, personal facts about them, but that doesn't mean you actually know who they are. And the same thing happens with God. In Hosea 6:6, when the Lord said, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, the knowledge of God more than burnt offerings, it's easy to go through the worship routine. Okay? And guess what happens? You know the routine, but do you take the time to really get to know who God is? Okay? We go through the motions. At seminary, you learn a lot about God. Okay? The dates, the names, the events. We know what happened on the fifth day of creation, who Moses' parents were, who the second judge was, what objects were in the ark. We acquire lots of knowledge. And you think you understand God, but actually, are you really any closer to Him relationally? That's the difference. Sometimes I run into people who know everything, more than I do, and I've been studying it my whole life. And then you run into somebody who doesn't know anything, but you can tell that they dwell in His presence. They're full of prayer. They got the attitude, the relationship. And it's interesting to see two different kinds of Christians. One who's loaded with information and one who's been in His presence. And we have to be careful that we're in His presence. And when you combine the two, wow, that's when God's super happy. And I'm making a big deal about you knowing Him because it's the most important relationship in your life. Okay? It's not your spouse or your spouse-to-be. It's not your children who we live our lives around. Okay? We're talking about God. You know, a couple of Sundays ago, I said, this one man was proposing to his wife, and he said, do you mind taking a second place in my life? Now, how would you feel about some guy saying, hey, how would you like to be second in my life? You want to marry me? You know? Well, if the first person in his life is Jesus Christ, it's the best thing you could ever do, ladies. Because you know what? That guy is going to be treating you in a whole different manner. He's going to be bringing the wisdom, the love of God into that relationship. I was reading about this guy named Dennis Wise. He collected Elvis memorabilia. Elvis was his hero. He bought Elvis's clothes. He bought records. He had plastic surgery done so he could look like Elvis. But his greatest regret in life was that he never got to meet the man he adored. Friends, this is a tragedy because it happens to Christians. They spend all this time listening to sermons and reading the Bible, but they fail to enjoy a close relationship. So how do you do it? Here's how you do it. You step into His presence and say, God, I want to know you. And so I'm inviting you into my life, and I'm going to follow you. I'm going to open up this Bible and let you and your word start to direct my path, direct my conversation, change my agenda. Whatever you want to do, Lord, I'm now yours. You pray like that, with that heart, this Bible filling your head, the supernatural starts to happen all over you. And this gets us to our Psalm 139. See, it's about a God who knows you. Think about the person who knows you most, knows you best. You know, it might not be your spouse. It could be your best friend. A lot of times that's the same person. Many of us have multiple best friends, okay? But I'm talking about the person who knows your embarrassing moments, your questionable thoughts. Don't we tend to keep that to ourselves? Psychologists suggest that we ought to maintain a private life, a private self. And Christian guys, they'll make this mistake, or maybe it's not a mistake. It's always a question. They'll share with their spouses all their lustful thoughts about other women. And how do you think she's going to handle that? She doesn't like to hear about this. But honey, I'm just being honest and telling you everything in my heart. Well, maybe that's a conversation for you to work out with God and not bring all your baggage and dump it on her. Make sense? I think so, because you don't know how many mad women I've had in my counseling sessions because the guys do this. I'm not saying you keep secrets, but sometimes you take your brokenness to God so that you can be an avenue of blessing to this other person in your life. Okay, don't turn them into your therapist all the time. And let me ask, did you ever do anything bad? I used to climb out the window at night, jump over the wall, go out with my friends, come back 3 in the morning, over the wall, push the window open, get back in. Mom never knew. So I was telling her about this the other day, and I said, Mom, I used to sneak out. She goes, oh, I know. What do you mean you knew? I was as quiet as a spy. She goes, I knew every night you went out. And you think Mom knows? Guess who else knows? God. He knows everything about you. He knows what you say. We're all in this political situation right now. Newt Gingrich, he was in the news back in the past because somebody overheard his phone conversation on a police scanner. He taped it, and he had it printed out word for word in the Washington Post. Can you imagine one of your private conversations showing up word for word in the Washington Post? Okay? How about every awkward thought that you've had to let people know about this? Guess what? God knows. And the psalmist starts off, search me. And when the word for search, it's a detailed inquiry into your life. It's to examine and explore. The word carries the idea of digging and scouring. This term is used for burglars when they're searching your house for your goods. And what David is basically saying is God knows him in a penetratingly deep way. He scoured and ransacked every detail of his life. Hey, can you get that for me, please? He's ransacked your life. Just incredible, isn't it? Bette Midler had a song, From a Distance. I hated that song, okay? God is watching us, God is watching us. I'm thinking, well, God's watching us from a distance, right? And here's the thing. One man said, God is the all-seeing eyeball in the sky. And I think that's kind of a weird thing. Have you ever gone on trips to the Middle East? They sell these eyeballs. It's called the eye of God, right? And it doesn't look like an eyeball. That's the pattern. It's a circular piece of jewelry. And this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about the eyes of God looking on you at all times. He knows when you sit and when you rise up. This represents all of our actions throughout the day. Remember when Jesus says, I am always with you? Wherever you're going, you have access to Jesus Christ. He's accompanying you whether you're paying attention to him or not. He's right alongside of you. And one of my seriously favorite passages in the Bible, you are intimately acquainted with all my ways. Now, it's kind of scary because he knows all the bad stuff about you, but he also understands who you are, okay? And for some of us, that's our strengths. He knows our habits, our weaknesses, all of our business. He knows why you did what you did. Remember, he scoured your soul to figure out who you are, the details. He understands our thoughts from afar. Okay? Again, he knows your thoughts. He knows what arguments we use against him. And here's what happens. People use arguments for why they're not going to walk with God, and then they'll bump into somebody like me, not knowing that I'm a pastor, and they'll release their argument that dismisses God, and then you answer that argument and back it up a couple of times, and you watch their eyes get about this big, and then they get really angry with you because you just messed up their perfect plan to go through life without God. And if it's a friend of yours, you'll notice something. They come back with a new argument. Okay? I've got friends who've made a lifetime with fresh arguments to keep God at bay. Okay? And I have a great time answering it, messing with their heads, and reminding them. And here's something else. 2 Corinthians 10:5. Take every thought captive. Well, if God knows every thought, it's good to take it captive. And this is the best part about God knowing your thoughts. When the wrong one starts to launch, you have this moment when you can grab it or release it. And the moment you release it, you're walking into sin. Now, you can catch it again. Wait. Okay? But if you don't catch it and just let it go, now you got sin circulating, unchecked in your head, flowing out from your soul. And we know sin's always got negative stuff, negative consequences. Okay? So, it's that little voice that taps you on the shoulder right when you're about to speak. That's the Holy Spirit. And he's right there to say, hey, you and I operate differently. You and I operate in grace and empowerment and encouragement and love. We don't release, we don't release the negative stuff. There's an amazing conversation when God asked Job, where were you when I made the foundations of the earth? Do you know how they were laid? Do you know how the sun sits in the sky? Do you know this? Do you know that? And Job says, no, I don't know. The implication is God does. And here's the whole point of God knows everything about you. It's not about the events of history and the riddles of the universe. It's that God knows you. He knows you. Jesus said every hair on your head is numbered, which for all of us means we're losing hair constantly and it's got to be a recount. Okay? Some it's not bad for recount. And we don't want God to know us because there's Bible verses like Ecclesiastes 12. God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether it's good or whether it's evil. You're like, oh man, every thought I have that's wrong, it's gonna get judged. And I've had one person say, I don't enjoy this invasion of my privacy. Okay, think about that. You run into all kinds of characters, accusing God of an invasion of privacy. Well, friends, you can't hide from the guy who made you and the guy who knows you, the God who cares about you intensely, okay? You can't hide from his penetrating look. And it gets worse. You can't flee from his presence. David says, where can I go from your spirit? And he visualizes the greatest distances he could imagine, up to heaven, down to Sheol, the place of the dead. Okay? Over to the far end of the sea, the wings of the dawn. I can't escape you. Doesn't matter how dark the night gets, God is there. This one 12-year-old, he was moving from Missouri to Montana. And so he got on his knees the night they were moving and said, Lord, I guess this is goodbye. Poor guy just thought that God wasn't in Montana. And if you've ever been there, it's a question, huh? He says, wow, I found out that he was there too. But let me tell you about the all-seeing eye, its purpose. 2 Chronicles 16:9. The eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth to strongly support those whose hearts are completely his. Do you want to know why God's looking out on you? Because he's trying to figure out, how to support you. And all this is about David realizing how much he means to God. Have you ever felt truly loved? It's that moment when someone knows us at a deeper level than anybody else, and they accept us, even though they know us better than anybody else. They're committed to us. They seek us out. They're by us when nobody else will stand by us. You know, I heard the story about little Johnny Sylvester. He was kicked in the head by a horse, and the doctors didn't think he was going to live. And so, as he was on his hospital bed dying, he said, "Boy, I wish I could see Babe Ruth hit a home run." Well, the news got sent to the Yankees, and the Yankees sent a ball back that Babe Ruth signed. "I'm going to hit a home run for you." And the next day, he hit 3 home runs. Okay? And the boy was so excited about this, he recovered. And so the uncle found Babe Ruth and sought him out and said, "Oh, I want to thank you for what you did." And as the uncle left, Babe Ruth turned to the reporter standing and said, "Who's Johnny Sylvester?" Okay? And isn't that like life? So many people don't really care about us. They're not interested in us. They might do something kind for us, but there's no real connection. But God never forgets about you. Everybody else might let you down. Here's the guy who still has his eye on you, still cares about you. And we know this because he says, "You knit me in my mother's womb." And we think, oh, isn't that poetic? But doesn't every single one of us have our own set of fingerprints? Which would imply what? That God is personally knitting us together. You and me, we're not the same. Well, I got different fingerprints than you. Okay? This God is actually, this is a tangible way to show how he's personally involved in who you are. And we could spend the rest of the night talking about the body's intricacies. You know, their hands are made of the most amazing parts. They have 19 bones arranged to form a cup or an arch on a flat surface or a bald fist, each shape occurring on demand. Fingers are able to lift a needle from a table or pick up a heavy rock. The arch in your foot is the strongest arch that's ever been created. There are miles of veins in your body. The ear is designed to pick up sounds out of the air, and you breathe without even thinking about it. Could you imagine if you had to think about every breath? I could go on and on what the body's about. And I know there's a lot of arguments that we're just an accidental collection of chemical interactions that have no purpose, no inherent value beyond reproduction. I know a few guys like that. And the evolutionary theories, they believe that we live for sex and food. And they think that the happy gene that we have is just a carryover through the evolutionary process. Okay? There's no real emotion involved. It just happens to be this thing that didn't disappear as we grew. And I guess the question that all of us have to answer is, are we animals? Or are we people made in the image of God? See? Evolution sees man as one step above the apes. The Bible sees man as one step below the angels. Or we're complex because we're made in the image of God. We're like him. And did you catch when I was reading in the Bible it says, "All my days ordained," when yet there was not one of them? This means that every single one of you, your life has been ordained into existence. You know, don't you think you were just kind of randomly made? Your mom and dad had that one moment, and the next thing you know, you came along, and, well, guess what? God was involved. And when you're ordained, this means that your life has a purpose. You know, there's so many people that failed in life and then became something. Albert Einstein failed in the math class, and he created the most incredible math equations. We all know about Abraham Lincoln, a whole bunch of failures, and he becomes the greatest president in the United States. A lot of us, we have failures, and it's weird. You see people stop at their failures and never go forward. And you see other people just cruise right past their failures, multiple failures. What's the difference? Well, I think all of us, if we knew that we were made with a purpose, that it would change the way we see ourselves. And you have a purpose. You were made by God. You were created for God. Ephesians 2:10, we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance all the days that were ordained from me. You know, this one man was selling vacuums. And he knocks on this door at a farmhouse, and the lady opens the door. He walks in, dumps a bag of dirt on the floor. And the salesman says, I want to make you a bargain. If my super duper vacuum cleaner can't pick all this stuff up, I'll eat it. She says, here's the spoon. We don't have electricity. Some things you wish you knew before you made your move. You know, when we go through life, it's good for us to know that we have a God who's watching out for us, a God who cares about us. And it gets better. It says in verse 17 that God thinks about us constantly. You know, there's a Bible verse in Isaiah 49:16. I have carved you in the palm of my hand. I mean, wow, that's incredible. You know, when David says, how precious are your thoughts to me, how vast is the sum of them. God thinks about you. Did you ever think about that? Did you ever consider that? That God actually thinks about you? And you go, well, how could he think about me? Well, this is the guy that made billions of, stars. I think he's pretty big. Okay? And he cares about you. You decide to activate a conversation with him, you got Almighty Universe Maker who's thinking about you, watching out for you, caring about you, ordaining days for you. That's who David's talking about. Okay? You're that important to God. And in verse 5, David talks about God's hand laying upon him. And sometimes it's a heavy hand. When you are struggling, sometimes that hand comes and you're not happy in struggling. I'm saying sinning. Guess what? You're not going to be happy if you're a Christian sinning. Because that heavy hand's going to be there going, hey, man, I got a better plan for you than what you're doing. But this hand, he talks about hemming them behind and before. It's a protective hand. It keeps us from the back. It protects us in the front. It shows up when you and I don't even realize it. You remember when the baby was in the house, if you've ever had a baby in your house, how many times that baby was about to hit his head and you covered the corner of the table? Or you saved the baby's head from smacking into the refrigerator or whatever it was? Man, I finally just had to give my kid a helmet, He was just crazy. One time he has an X-Acto knife. And you know how they would do this? They check it out before they put it in their mouth. Okay. So I'm going to say from here to where the offering plate is, I come out the hallway, and he's doing the old, about to do that. And I realize if I go, Elijah, right? So I got to play it smooth. So I did my best impression of Usain Bolt, the guy that runs the 100-yard dash. And I just jumped into his presence and grabbed his hands and just gently said, hello, I mean, you just care about your kids and you protect your kids and you're looking out for your kids. And that's what this hand does. And we don't even know how often God cares for us. At the men's conversation at 6:15 in the morning, Mark Swanson, he was telling a story how he's driving along, and all of a sudden he gets this nagging thing. Do you have the airline tickets? He goes, of course I have the airline tickets. You don't know where your airline tickets are. So he stops the car, pulls over, goes and finds his airline tickets. I knew I had them. Gets back into the car, drives over the ridge where there's this huge multi-car pileup that just happened. So God said, hey, I want you to pull over. God was protecting him. And friends, that's what he does for us. Well, what is this psalm all about? Have you ever been around somebody who's in love? It's one of the most unbearable experiences, right? They can't think about anybody else. They can't talk about anybody else. They don't want to be with you. They'd rather be with them, but they have to be with you, so they tell you all about them. And, it's sickening. And Or how about when you cared about that person and you went out on a date, and then you come back from the date, and then you think about everything that was said. Well, maybe I shouldn't have said this. Well, I wonder if she didn't like that. And you replay the whole event over in your head, right? I think this is what David's doing. See, this is an expression of his adoration for the Lord. And I find it fascinating that 2 different times in the psalm, David invites God to examine his heart. Man, I think the last thing I want to do is say, hey, Lord, come take a look at my heart, you know? Oh, gosh. And I'm afraid of what he's going to find. Hey, remember that book a few years ago, about 10 years ago, The Secret? You know, this person found the secret to life. You know, ooh, we got to get the book. I need to know the secret. Well, the secret was the power of positive thinking. Like, oh man, there's a whole bunch of books like that. You know, that's no big deal. I already know that. And here's the thing. When God gets involved in your life, it's more than positive thinking. You see, when God gets into your life, he starts directing it and guiding you and protecting you and giving your life significance and meaning. I mean, all kinds of incredible intangibles start to occur in your life that change the tangibles of who you are and everything about you. You see, David was a guy that he wasn't confident or courageous because of his personal abilities. He was who he was because he understood who God was. More importantly, he understood who he was to God. And that's what I really want you to understand, who you are to him. I mean, God really loves you. Yeah, but I got all these sins. I know. He knows. Believe me, he knows. And he knows you needed Jesus to die on the cross. And so he took care of that. He knows all that stuff about you. You know, Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. And it's good to do a little bit of self-analysis, but here's what happens. How many of us do the self-analysis that leads to paralysis? Okay? And we think of all our mistakes and all our failures. Hey, God knows that. And that's why he's looking in on you. We think that God is looking for faults and ready to condemn us. He wants to take our dark secrets and deeds and hold us against them. No. God's looking out for us because he cares about what's going on in your life. He's worried about the destructive things that you have going on. He wants to bring another angle of healing and hope and abundant life into your world. He loves us too much to just let us go through life struggling. And I'm going to say, don't be afraid to ask God to point it out to you. I remember one time I was in church. This is a long time ago. And I felt like, I've been living in the zone, the spiritual zone. And I said, Lord, man, I think I'm good. If you want to show me anything that's not good, I'm okay. I'm all ears. And all of a sudden, this came to mind. And I thought this deed was good, but actually there was a selfish motive behind it. And after he got to about 5 things showing me what a mess I was, I said, well, Lord, it's been nice chatting with you. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and I'm going to go home now, Yeah, we got stuff. And if you're willing to let him in, he's willing to clean you up. He's willing to show you a better way to do life. And for David, nothing meant more to him than his relationship with God. What's he called? A man after God's own heart? He wants to make sure that he's in the right spot with God, that he's acceptable and worthy. He's secure in his relationship with God. And when you know that you're absolutely loved by God, who sees you, who knows you, who cares about you, then you're not afraid to invite him in. And he wants to come in and heal, assist, and do life with you. Let me close up. There was a young man who was on the football team. He never missed practice, but he never got to play. And the last week of football season, I think he's probably Monday or Tuesday. Somebody shows up, hands the coach a note for him, and he gives it to the kid, and the kid opens it up and starts crying. And he's going, "What's going on?" He goes, "My dad died." He goes, "All right, go home, take care of business. Don't worry about coming back to the game on Saturday." Well, it's Saturday, and the funeral's over, and so he shows up. It's halftime, and gets all suited up and goes out and says, "Hey, Coach, I'm here." And Coach, we never played anyways. It's no big deal. And so he says, "Hey, Coach, can I play?" And well, they're a couple of touchdowns behind, and what does it look like? It doesn't look like they're going to win. So yeah, all right, I'll put you in. And the ball comes his way, and the kid does amazing moves and scores a touchdown. Oh, cool. So the next set of downs, what you usually do is if something worked last time, we'll try it again. They got the ball to him again. Amazing speed, scores another touchdown. And the game's tied, and a fumble happened or something. This kid grabs the ball, scores the winning TD, and everybody's amazed. They can't believe it. This guy who's a nobody is now a somebody, and the coach goes, "Wow, this is amazing. I had no idea that you were this good of an athlete. What's going on with you?" And the kid's eyes, they teared up, and he said, my dad just died, and he came to all the games, but he was blind. He never could see anything. And well, tonight was the first time he could ever watch me. So I wanted to do my best. And you have a God that's watching you. He sees everything you do. And you know what? He's cheering for you. He's worrying about you. He's strategizing on how to protect you. He's your biggest fan. And I think if you allow his presence to motivate you to do your best, well, it's not just to please him. He wants your best because he knows what's best for you. Lord Jesus, it's amazing to belong to you. And again, too many times we live scared of you or nervous or at a distance, and you're just saying, "Come, I love you. I died for you. I made you like me. You belong to me. I got a place in heaven with me." And so tonight, we want to embrace this incredible God that you are and invite you all the way into our heads and hearts and lives. And I pray for anybody here tonight who needs a healing touch, that you and that amazing hand of yours would rest upon them. And your spirit would move within us. And that you would cause us to have a completely different life because we're aware of just how intimately acquainted you are